All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Jesus for Mormons. I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon church, and this is my story of what I did after I left the church.
And my name is Di Beals. I'm part of Venture Church. I'm a pastor and your friend, and happy to be on the journey with you, Kai.
All right. Well, great. So last episode, we went over parts of my journey, and there were two times in it that I thought were really interesting and unique that you brought up that I had never really thought about. One of them was this idea of mourning something that was lost. And when you brought that up, it made me actually research a ton over this last week. We record weekly. Of what mourning looks like, the different stages to mourning. And really, when I experienced this, I thought, Kai, this is just something that happened and you need to get over it as quickly as possible. And I don't think I really saw that there was steps to this, or that there were feelings that I should have had and
that are legitimate. Yes.
Yeah, that are legitimate. And I think that's important to point out to anyone who's kind of going through this. I want to research mourning more and maybe do a little bit more in depth and maybe talk about those stages maybe at a later date. But I think that's really important for people to realize that there is a real loss here.
Right.
And that I think it's important to treat it just like mourning. The other thing that came up is when you were apologizing, which we sat here across from each other, and
the emotional girl got emotional.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was interesting that you did that, and I think it's interesting from the perspective is I like being spiritual. I like those types of things, and so I was like, oh, this is a great moment. But if you step aside from that and just look at it from caring about your mission, believing in something bigger than yourself, I would hope that I wouldn't stand in the way of anyone kind of aligning with that mission. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing. I think a lot of people, if you're in the ex-Mormon space, you're probably familiar with the quote by Elder Oaks that says that we do not give apologies, nor do we ask to receive them. And so I thought that was a really cool thing for you to just come on and apologize to people who have maybe experienced hurt within church.
And if people missed that episode, they should go back and listen. But just for our sake today, I don't want to do damage to people. As a human who loves other humans, as a Christian who loves other people, as a pastor who loves and cares for people, but I am a human and I make mistakes, and I want to be able to apologize for my own, but also some people aren't willing to apologize, and I'm okay apologizing on behalf of the pain that has been caused to somebody. I'll take that role. Even if I'm not the cause of it, I'll bear some of the responsibility for damage that's done to people that is not right.
Yeah, I think that's big of you. I'm trying to think of the right term, but I think that's great of you to want to do that for others. Okay, so we are going to get into our topic today, and the title of this is "Nobody Likes You When You're 33."
I know. I'm dying to know why you're not liked when you're 33.
Yeah. So for all of you Blink-182 fans out there, this is kind of a spin-off of their song. So when I left the church, the number one question that I got from people, kind of in my inner circle, people that I said who were outside of the church, even people inside of the Mormon church, the number one question I always got was, how is your family dealing with you leaving the church? Over and over. And I still get that question. Sure. How is your family kind of coping with this idea of you leaving the church? I think there is some misinformation out there, but I think that they know, I think from a general sense, people know that Mormons are very committed to their family, that there's maybe they might know the teaching of people being sealed to their families for eternity, and what that, might have some ideas about that. And so I think it's important to first maybe answer this question with giving some background about my family.
Yeah.
So I am the baby. I am the baby of four.
That checks out. No,
Yeah. No one really sees me as the baby. They always see me as the second oldest, but I am the baby of four. And my parents are really they are the best people that I know. I mean, they really are awesome, great people. Me and my second oldest brother, when we talk about my parents, my second oldest brother left the church a few decades ago. My brother said, our parents are such amazing people. I don't think that I could live a life that's even close to the way that they've lived.
Wow.
And I think if you understand where my parents came from and where they're at, I think that's kind of an interesting, I think that's not a hard conclusion to come to. And in a way, I feel inadequate, even comparing myself to my parents. So my mom was number 9 of 10. So big Mormon household, right? 9 of 10. Her dad was a school teacher and her mom was stay-at-home parent. So, if you kind of do the math on that one.
That's not a lot of money for food to go around. Or
exactly.
Clothes. Yeah.
Yeah. You came to the conclusion that I hope everyone comes to. So it's not a lot. And my mom, she still had a lot of aspirations, though, to be really included in school, to be popular, to be all those things. And she wanted to be a cheerleader, which is very expensive to do, especially back then. She really wanted to do that. So my mom worked her tail off in high school, like worked full time, was a cheerleader, went to school, like very, my mom's a hustler. She can work, really, really
good
hard.
For her.
Yeah. My mom was also the primary breadwinner in our home, which is interesting.
Yeah.
For 30 years, she ran her own business. But before it was, from the 90s till the early 90s to 2020, she ran her own business, a large business, a daycare that had 70 kids in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, multiple employees.
Okay, you said running a business, and I thought one thing. Running a daycare is way beyond running a business. That is many, many hours of very hard work.
Yeah. So
Good for her.
Yeah, so she did that for 30 years.
I don't know how.
They owned the building. They ran it. They did all of the government checks to make sure that they're compliant. All of the stuff to do that. So my mom is really a hustler, and she raised kids. My dad is kind of an interesting story. At 14, he was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. So it's interesting. People will always be like, so your dad, and they kind of like poke around it. They like want to ask me like, why does he walk with a limp, or why does he have a hard time moving around? And so he has muscular dystrophy. He got that at 14. He was diagnosed with it. His mom had it, and then her mom had it.
Isn't it unusual to even still be able to walk at all by this point?
Well, he can't walk really now. He can move kind of around.
Degenerative.
Yes. Okay. So your muscles don't continue to rebuild.
Right.
And
they
grow.
don't break down or rebuild. Yeah.
Yeah. So he watched his mom kind of be bedridden at age 50 on. And so he's tried to stay as active as he possibly can to try to do that. He grew up on a cherry farm and grew up working hard, though, like working in the farm, in the fields, and doing that. There was a long period of time where he didn't want to accept that he had muscular dystrophy because he saw the effects that it had on his mom. And there was a lot of financial stress also, in my dad's life. They had to file, they lost multiple farms in the process because my grandma, her medical bills, she was in a nursing home for 20 years. And so my parents kind of both come from these, households that were, I would consider to be not high income. Let's just put it that way, right? Not high income households.
Could you say that any more politically correct?
Yeah. But they had kind of one thing. Both of them had one thing, and they had the church. They had the Mormon church. And that was what kind of, I think, gave some hope to both those families, which is interesting to think about in hindsight. So my parents both went to Central Washington University, and there's this thing called Institute. No, we haven't talked about this, but in a non-church school, there's like a religious class for people who are Mormon.
Oh, okay.
It's called Institute, and you'll come, like for Everett Community College, they have Institute.
Okay.
And so they'll have a teacher. And so my parents met there. My dad, after 2 weeks, asked my mom to marry him. They got married.
He knows what he likes.
My dad's he's a gunslinger. Always has been a gunslinger. So they did that. They moved to Toppenish. They bought a single wide mobile home with shag carpet in Toppenish. And then they hooked a truck up to it and moved it to a different trailer park in Granger. So they,
moving up in the world.
Moving up the Palm Springs of Washington. If you know
Okay.
Washington, that's kind of a little joke on the Yakima Valley in there. So my dad was working at a fast food restaurant, kind of not really, like, my dad has big aspirations. He has big dreams for himself. Even though he had muscular dystrophy, he still believed that he could do a lot of things. And this is something that my parents built into all of us siblings. Like, there is no like limiting beliefs. My parents just like don't believe in those. They always tried to like build us up. And so my dad sold everything he had. He moved to Germany, got this amazing job, and like very spiritually led did that. And I think that's pretty cool. My dad is, they're both just amazing individuals. So they come back to the United States. I was born in Germany. Probably, I don't know if you knew that, but
I think you might have mentioned it in the first episode, or I picked it up somewhere.
Picked it up somewhere. Yeah. So I was born over there. And when they came back to the States, my parents really believe in like systems. Like, they had us all wrestle. All of us boys wrestle. Okay. They had all of us do Boy Scouts. So all three of us made it to the state tournament for wrestling. 2 out of 3 of us were Eagle Scouts. And 3.5 of us went on a mission. And so they believe in these like systems, this systematic way of approaching and really like making sure holding us kids accountable to those systems, right? And they believe that they were a great way to develop people. So, and as I've spent 5 years coaching, I've seen that it's really not the kids who quit. It's the parents that don't hold the kids accountable, and then the kids quit. And so that's actually made me kind of respect my parents a lot more.
Sure.
That they've kind of been like, hey, we're driving you to practice. Like, you're going to work on getting an Eagle Scout, be an Eagle Scout. So I really do just have a ton of respect for my parents in the way that they were all in, dedicated, like, to their kids and making sure that they accomplish things as young people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really, really important thing to emphasize. And so I want to tell 2 quick stories about my parents from a spiritual perspective. They came up with, my mom is fashionable, right? She looks nice, takes care of herself. At one point, she had the 2 earrings, and a lot of ex-Mormons might know where I'm going with this, because this is kind of a popular thing. She had 2 earrings in, and in the Mormon church, they announced you can only have 1 set of earrings.
Oh, wait, approximately when was this? Recently-ish?
Like 2000.
Oh, pretty recently. Okay.
Pretty recently.
Okay.
Yeah, which is more recent than I thought it was going to be. I tried to research if they said it earlier, and then they said it again in 2000. But when I researched it, it was Gordon B. Hinckley said it, who was the prophet of the church in 2000. So that was 3 prophets ago. He said that, and my mom went home that evening, took out the 2nd set, never put them back in, right? Okay. Very dedicated to the church.
Yep.
Very into it. My dad was also very spiritual. He was kind of the first person to stand up in fast and testimony meeting, which I don't think we've gone over.
Nope.
Okay, so every first Sunday, it's like open pulpit at the Mormon church.
Oh, wow.
Like open pulpit. So if you ever want like the fireworks to go off, you show up the first Sunday.
I do know Mormons who have talked about sharing their testimony, but
Yes.
I didn't know the context of it.
Yeah. So sharing their testimony would be, well, they could be asked,
Okay.
right? Because there's no paid clergy at this level. So they could be asked like, hey, go give a talk in church.
That's exactly the language they use, was give a talk.
Give a talk in church. So, yeah. So then they would give their testimony at the end of it. So my dad was kind of the first one to do that. Me and my dad, this is kind of one of those things where you observe your parents in a non-church setting. I grew up wrestling. Hey, if you didn't know that, maybe you should go back and watch the other episodes. But I grew up wrestling, and a lot of my friends transitioned from wrestling to fighting. That's a very common thing.
Yeah.
And so we would go watch them because I knew them. I used to train with these guys, wrestling wise. And so I remember there would always be the ring girl. And I would watch my dad when they went up,
Yeah.
She's the ring girl.
Much. She's not wearing much.
Not wearing much. I used to watch my dad. My dad would always look away. He would always, not in a like.
Impressive.
Yeah, not in a like, hey, Kai, he wouldn't say anything to me. That's not his deal. He's not going to say like, oh, Kai, you need to look away and make a show of it. He just would look away.
Yeah.
Right. And he's just a good moral human. Right. And a great dad. So I hope that gives you a perspective. My parents have also been extremely successful in financially. They've been very successful. They've come a long way from the single wide mobile home in Granger. They have been very successful. And so that's why when I look at my parents, I say, I mean, from where they came from to where they are now, I couldn't have asked for a better mom and dad than them. So I hope that gives a perspective into my life. And so now we're going to go and talk about when I told my parents that I was leaving the church. I want to give a little perspective, though, of when a baby is born and blessed, kind of all of the males in the family, or they could be extended family, they will like go and bless the child. I think it's important to give that. So my sister had a baby, and they were going to bless the baby. And they decided to do it on the 4th of July when we're all together, when everyone comes in. And you're only asked to do that if you like hold the priesthood. So if you are, am I getting too jargony?
Well, our audience will probably understand more than me, but yeah, you did just lose me on that.
Okay, so the priesthood is like they lay hands on your head and they say, now you can act for God. Let's keep it real simple.
That would be the man of the household.
Man of the household, or anyone who is given the priesthood from like age 12 on. So,
do you have to be a male?
You have to be a male.
Okay.
No females.
Okay.
So on the 4th of July, like I had said, I don't want anything to do with the church months and months and months earlier.
But not yet to your family?
But not yet to my family. Okay. And so there was kind of this event.
It's all coming to a head right now.
It's all coming to a head. And if
I feel anxious.
Yeah. So it's all coming to a head because I'm the type of person where like I'll avoid things. Like I think a lot of people avoid things. But I'm also not going to do something that isn't authentically me.
Yeah.
That's where I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to go along with this. And so I remember pulling my brother-in-law and my sister aside and saying, please don't ask me to be a part of the blessing of your child. I don't want to kind of be put in that situation, because if I'm not asked, then it's kind of like, oh, they didn't ask him, so that's okay.
Okay.
Because they ask, they initiate, like, hey, will you stand in while we bless? And so they didn't ask. And my sister turns to me and she says, Kai, are you going to ruin this day? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, I just get the feeling you're going to just kind of blow this up. And I'm like, ugh. So that's how it started. And so I didn't ask. They blessed the child. I sat off to the side with my brother, who also, wasn't asked as well, to do that. And so it just kind of created this weird, I mean, you know, when you can tell that it's weird and everyone can kind of tell that it's weird, everyone knows that I should have been in there.
Okay.
And this was done in our home.
Oh, okay.
So this is a very intimate setting.
Okay.
This is not just like in church where, you know, I probably would have like shown up late or something, you know. I mean, this is like, we're all there. Oh, let's bless the child. Because it's during COVID.
And it's very obvious that you have not been asked and you should have been.
Yeah, and I should have been up there.
Okay.
So it's just very awkward. And I'm like, okay, I got to kind of address this with my parents. And I did it individually because I didn't want to do it together.
Did your brother that you were sitting off to the side with already know?
No.
So nobody knew.
Nobody knew
except for that tip off to your sister.
Except for that tip off to my sister, and then my wife obviously knew.
Yeah.
At that point. So we're like, so then it kind of ends, and I'm like, you know, I just got to tell my dad. I'm like going to ease into this because my dad would be, I think, more receptive to it. And so we go out on their deck and we're talking, and I said, Dad, you know, I've decided to leave the church. Just for a lot of different reasons. I don't necessarily want to get into all the reasons, but I have decided to leave, and I won't be back. You know, I want to just be direct and say that. And I think a younger version of my dad, the kind of gunslinger version of my dad, would have really tried to wrestle me back. Would have tried to really, but my dad's in his 60s. He has muscular dystrophy. He was just kind of like, well, okay, Kai, I don't really understand. I don't get what you're talking about, but it is what it is, was kind of his approach, which I didn't think that would be his reaction. I thought he would be a little bit more fight oriented because my dad's kind of aggressive in that way, but he wasn't at all. But he said, Kai, I'm going to tell you this. I'm not going to be the one to tell your mom. You're the one to tell your mom. I'm not going to have this affect my marriage because of this, right?
It's actually wise of him.
Yeah. I don't think he wanted to shoulder that burden. So then it kind of comes to the really hard part of telling people, because I mean, my siblings, they've kind of dealt with it with my brother, my dad, but then you kind of have my mom, who's very, very into the church. I mean, very just dedicated
and you don't want to disappoint her or hurt her or make her cry.
Yeah. And I think that there's this, my mom's always been a huge supporter of mine. Like, I've taken huge risks as an adult, and my mom's always been like, Kai, if there's a human on the earth that can do this, you can do this. Like, I believe in you, that you can turn around this investment. Like, I believe in you more than anybody. Like, just breathing life in, right? Like, that's my mom, right? Is just, there is no limits to what you can do in life. So I remember going to her office in her house and talking to her and saying, hey, Mom, I got to talk with you, and her first response was, I can't believe your brother-in-law, my son-in-law, that he would not ask you to bless his kid. Like, I can't believe that he would do that. And I'm like, Mom, I talked to him beforehand. I said that I don't really want to be involved in it and a part of it. And she's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, why would you not want to be a part of it? And I said, Mom, I've made the decision to leave the church. I made the decision to not, be a part of it anymore. And I remember looking at her and going from just normal to she actually collapsed, like fell on the ground and started crying. And she said, I just don't understand what you're talking about. Like, how can this, you know what I mean? How can this be? And so then I kind of sit on the floor and we're talking. And I said, Mom, I just don't believe that it's true anymore at all. And I know that's like super hard to hear, but I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to I have to kind of be open about this.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A few days ago, me and my mom actually talked about this a little bit. And she says, Kai, I wish you would have told me in a different way, about what you were experiencing. And I said, Mom, I kind of wish I would have never told you. I wish I would have just always had a way to hide these feelings that I had. Cause it hasn't, me and my dad have kind of whatever, we've moved on. Everything's very normal. Me and my mom, it hasn't really been that normal. It hasn't really, it's gotten better than it was when we first.
Because it's been close to 2 years, a year and a half.
No, it's been 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a chunk of time.
Yeah. And I think it goes in waves of our connection. And, there's a lot in the church that binds families together. And when someone feels like, oh, I'm not going to be with this person for eternity, like we're not just talking about like, oh, a few days or, that's really the rhetoric in the church.
Yes.
And so I can see how that would be really, really hard. My mom, I think she's somebody who loves very deeply and hurts very deeply. Right. And I get that from her. I love very deeply and I hurt very deeply. And I also go all in on things. And so does she, like that, just, yeah, you can do it, type of attitude. And so I would say that's been the worst part of my leaving the church, is really that strain with my relationship with my mom, because it's not an equal relationship. Me and my older brother kind of got into it about me leaving the church, but it's an equal relationship. We're peers.
Right.
My mom is not my peer. She's my mother. She's, it's just a different relationship. And so that not being mended, and I don't think it can be mended in the way that maybe either one of us would.
Right. Yeah.
Would think is perfect. I think that's also a challenge.
Yes.
Right? Like at the end of the day, like I just want my mom to be proud of me, right? For whatever, being a guy in my 30s who's trying to raise my kids the right way and trying to do, trying to pour into people, trying to, run a great business, trying to, I think that's kind of everyone. Like everyone wants their parents to be proud of them and to think that they're doing the right things. And so that's kind of the hardest part about this is I sincerely want like my parents to be honored and to feel proud of me that, their son is doing what is good. And so I think that's kind of the hardest part about this. And I do think with time it will get better, because that's what happened with my second oldest brother. Over time, it's just kind of, okay, but I really wish that time would speed up. I guess that's a reoccurring theme in some of these grieving, hard things.
I was just going to say, I think that word grief that we circled around last week and you brought up at the beginning of this episode, it's not just you that feels that grief, that your mom is experiencing a level of grief, and it's really hard to associate that to your choice.
Exactly.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you are hurting her, but she feels hurt, and it's because of choices you've made. So that's hard to carry around, and yet doesn't release you from the responsibility to do what you feel is right.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part for me is like, I like things. I shouldn't say I like things, but if I know I'm wrong, okay, Kai, you acted wrong. You
lost your temper and you hurt somebody and you'll own it.
Yeah, I acted like a big idiot. Okay,
yeah.
I'll own it and I'll say, I'm sorry, I did this thing. And this isn't really one of those scenarios. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, the church is like kind of true and I should just back down from this. And, I should live still in the church. And it's like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not wired to have that type of relationship. And so I think it's mostly like trying to, well, I guess I'll go to the question that I put forward to today. Before we started, I gave you a question. And it's what advice would you have for people who are in mixed faith relationships? So that could be brother and sister, that could be parents and children, that could be parents together, which I'm sure as a pastor, you have probably kind of seen a lot of different scenarios of mixed faith relationships. So what would you kind of say towards that based on your experience?
You probably have no idea how hard that question is. And I think because you just listed off a smattering of relationships that are all so different, I think there is a reality of different religions or different religious belief systems are different. So it's really hard to be in an intimate relationship with somebody, whether it's some level of an intimate friendship. Because I think at a low level, you can learn to respect somebody. But if you're in an intimate relationship, or a close relationship of some sort, there's limits to how close that relationship really feels like it can be, because you're not sharing this other really valuable part of your life. And it even could be someone that believes in a religious system and somebody doesn't. Their religion, so to speak, is atheism. They don't believe in anything. I've watched my mom walk this out. I think that's probably the best example I can give. My mom gave her life to Jesus as a young mom. My dad, I don't know if he would ever really tell me what he believes. I think he believes there is a God and doesn't say much beyond that. And so I've watched my mom and dad be married for 50 years. And this is a sad part of my mom's life that she doesn't have to share with my dad. But she has modeled for me, I think, the best way of doing that, which is a respect for him. She's not going to be able to bludgeon him into her belief system. She can't beg him to believe what she believes. So I think that mutual respect is a big piece of it, knowing that, the person that you're in relationship with is always watching how you handle things. And that's not to put undue pressure, but they're watching how you'll respond to them. And just knowing, I think there is some level of separation that just exists because you're missing the ability to share this part of your life.
Sure. I think, and I've felt that as well. Like that there's this, I think that it's great when people have things in common that bind them together. Right. And whether that's in your marriage or in friendship or in relationship with your family. And I think that was a big thing that bonded, I would say, me and my mom was, our relationship in the church, and gave, those things. So I think that's a really good point, to just respect the other person.
Yeah. And I think you just touched on something that's important, and that is find common ground. If it's a relationship that is valuable and important enough for you to put the effort in. Yeah. I mean, there are some relationships that you're like, we're only ever going to be arm's length relationship because, we're just friends or we have too many differences. But, with a parent or a sibling, I think looking for common ground, which my dad and I have a deep bond over World War II. I don't know where that came from, but we pass back and forth books about World War II. It's what we talk about when we're together. But we've both made the effort to find an area that we can share our lives with each other that is not disagreeable or contentious or he just shuts down and doesn't want to talk.
Yeah. And I think this actually brings up a really hard topic for people who have left the church, because there is so much anger and resentment towards the church, right? Towards the Mormon church, I guess I should clarify. And so it's hard for them to even, it's difficult for me to talk to my family about Jesus because I have such a hardened view of the religious system that they're in.
Right.
And so it's hard for me to even find that one, point that might even touch.
Right.
With them. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
But that one point that might be is like, oh, it's too close to the sore spot.
And it's too close to where the roads diverge and you have differences of opinion. It's too close to triggering a potential landmine that causes, conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of an interesting thing and I hope as years pass by, maybe I can, try to celebrate things with them. So try to celebrate Christmas in a very Christian way, or Easter in a very Christian way that kind of has where there's more connection there.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. It's so hard for me right now to try to have that commonality with them. Maybe that means I don't know. Maybe that's a shortcoming of mine. I don't know. But
well, the beauty is your biggest commonality, besides that you're their child, who they love. But you have 3 precious children, and that is safe ground to talk about. Not necessarily what religious system you're raising them in, but who they are and what they're doing and what they love and how they're wired. And that's great common ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and probably something that I should do better at it in creating a stronger relationship with my.
Yeah, you look for
mother,
safe
right?
spaces.
Yeah, I like trying to find things for that. So, well, yeah, I know that this is kind of a heavy subject to talk about today, but I think it's something that comes up a lot, and it's come up a lot with, different friends that I have who've left the church. It's definitely been something huge for me, and I appreciate you, Di, for your pastoral knowledge, right, on this subject, and just experience with that. And
you're not 33 anymore, so now you're liked?
I am, I would say I'm mostly liked. I mean,
just tying back in your title.
Oh, tying back in my title.
Nobody likes you when you're 33, but
yeah,
if
36.
you pass 33, you're okay.
I'm I think as much as somebody can like me, I guess. No. So no, I think that my relationship with my parents is getting better. And I think that there's more hits than there are misses now, right?
Good.
We get together. So this is an interesting thing. We get together every single Sunday, and we have for the last decade. And so even during all of this, we got together. Those were really painful when I first left the church. I'll just say, it was just like, but I'm like, grind it out. And there were a lot of times where I didn't want to go just based off of, I don't think this is helping either one of us. I would come home and just be like, I don't know if I could edit the conversation for this podcast, but I would be very upset about how I felt it went. And I think sometimes you can sense disappointment, right? You can sense.
Yeah. You're just re-exposing yourself to pain.
Yeah. And there was a point where I was like, I just don't really ever want to do this again. But I'm like, it's going to get better. And it has gotten better. I guess that's the hope. Right?
Yeah.
Like, let's bring some hope into this. Like, it will get better with your family. And I think that, there's grief on both sides. There's heartache on both sides. Mm-hmm. And so I do believe it.
I commend you for putting in the work.
Yeah.
Because it is easier sometimes to just drop people and walk away.
Yeah, and I think I could do more. I mean, I'm not, I appreciate that. I should say I appreciate that as a compliment. But I do feel that there's, putting yourself out there is very hard, I think. And I could do more to mend the relationship, with that.
I delivered a message at church, I don't know, a few months ago. I don't remember what message it was, but I remember this line because it gets quoted back to me almost every week. You can do your whole life alone. But if you do, you will be alone.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I know you have your wife and your kids, but good for you for recognizing you could just bail and be out there on your own, the wayward child that's doing something different, but you put the work in, and relationships are tough.
Yeah.
They're hard work. So good job.
Well, yeah, I would agree with you. Relationships are hard. So I hope that this podcast has brought just a little bit of hope to people who are, dealing with this with their families. And, as hard as that is, and I really do hope that if somebody went to church with my mom and they heard this podcast, I would hope that they would wrap their arms around my mom and just just tell them that they love them.
I want to wrap my arms around your mom.
Yeah. And just tell them I love you. Like, this is hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think that would be a really powerful thing. I think there's so many people who leave the church and then kind of put their family on blast. And I'm not trying to be negative towards those people, but I'm just trying to.
You're trying to honor your mom and dad.
Yeah. And I think 10 years down the line, I think those people may look at that situation a little differently.
Yeah.
They may look at they're experiencing hurt. Your parents are experiencing hurt. Maybe we should just take it a little easier on each other and let there be a cooling off period, and then maybe approach, separate the church from the family, separate the church
Wise
from
advice
from your parents. So anyways, well, thank you. Thanks, Di, for joining me on this.
Therapist Di in this episode.
Di. There you go. And therapist Di and emotional Kai. How about that? So, all right. Well, thank you. And
looking forward to the next episode.
Yeah, to the next. On to the next.
On to the next.
All right.